So today we're going to talk about libertarianism. It's a very controversial school of thought, and personally I am very skeptical about it. But to be quite honest, I never actually invested enough time into some proper research of the subject. I read a couple of texts, I know a couple of memes, and in general I know how to make fun of delusional and stupid libertarians. So in this episode, I'm going to pretend that I don't know anything about what libertarianism is, and I will let chatgpt do an introduction for me. I mean, if I want to hate on libertarians, at least I want to have some proper background. I'm still not going to read any books though. Libertarianism is a political philosophy that upholds liberty as its principal objective. Libertarians seek to maximize autonomy and political freedom. They strongly oppose any form of coercion and believe in the concept of self-ownership, where individuals are free to control their own bodies, actions, and possessions, as long as they do not infringe upon the same rights of others. So this sounds very nice. Like, if you're someone who doesn't know anything about libertarianism, you read this and you immediately feel good about what you read. But of course, the devil is always in the details. There are many different types of libertarianism, including anarcho-capitalism, left libertarianism, and minarchism. But first, I just remembered that many people seem to confuse libertarianism with liberalism, and it would kind of make sense to clarify the difference between those two notions. So what is the difference between libertarianism and liberalism? They're both political philosophies that advocate for individual freedom. Just as I said, libertarianism is not the only paradigm that is focused on freedom, but they do so from different perspectives and prioritize different aspects of liberty. The key differences are, so one of the first things that you learn about libertarianism when you start reading about it is that libertarians hate the government. They don't want the government to intervene into people's lives, and from what I understand, their whole philosophy is kind of built around this hatred towards the government. Libertarians generally advocate for minimal government intervention in all areas of life. The state's role is mainly protecting individual rights and property. Some extreme forms of libertarianism, like anarcho-capitalism, argue for the elimination of the state altogether. So I think you can see how this is immediately getting a little bit sketchy. On the other hand, liberals believe in a more active role for the government, particularly in the economic sphere. They argue that the government is necessary for correcting market failures, protecting consumers, and ensuring economic equality. The immediate question that comes to mind here is if the liberals think that the government should protect the consumers and ensure economic equality, what do libertarians think about this? Who is going to protect consumers under libertarianism? The answer is that libertarians believe that the best outcomes for consumers and businesses are achieved when the markets are allowed to do what they want, to function freely and without interference. Of course, we're going to ask how exactly free markets are supposed to do so, because I don't recall any examples of a free, unregulated market creating anything close to economic equality. But probably I should have ended that sentence a little bit earlier, because to be quite fair, I can't even recall any examples of a free, unregulated market. Here is how the issues of consumer protection and economic equality would typically be addressed from a libertarian perspective. Libertarians would say that the market itself is the best protector of consumers. In a free market, businesses must compete for customers by offering better products, lower prices, and superior service. But also free markets tend to transform into monopolies, and as far as I know, monopolies are not good for the consumer. Anyway, the second issue is economic equality. And it seems like libertarianism does not necessarily aim to ensure economic equality, either in terms of equal outcomes or wealth distribution. Libertarians generally value economic freedom and the right to private property over economic equality. So basically what they're saying is, we don't care. If you're poor, you're poor. And this is my favorite part. They argue that a free market encourages innovation, productivity, and economic growth, which can benefit everyone in the society. I might be wrong, but this sounds to me like in the free market, if you're not successful, then this is basically your problem, or the problem is in you. You're lazy, you're not productive enough, you do not produce any innovations, and thus you're poor, and shame on you. Libertarians argue that while this may lead to income inequality, as long as everyone has the same opportunities to succeed, this is not inherently problematic. Once again, it's not clear why would everyone have the same opportunities to succeed. Actually, what do libertarians think about inheritance tax? Oh, that's a stupid question because, of course, libertarians think that any taxation is theft. So one would assume that inheritance tax is also problematic for libertarianism. And if inheritance tax is not something that we want to have, how exactly are we going to have a society in which everyone has the same opportunities to succeed? I don't know. Maybe we should ask about that. How would everyone have the same opportunities to succeed, especially if there is no inheritance tax? Please provide references to relevant scientific articles. What do we have here? Libertarians argue that every individual should have the right to the fruits of their labor, which includes the right to transfer their wealth to their children, hence opposition to inheritance tax. Just as we expected. They also believe in equal opportunity in terms of the freedom to participate in the market. Okay. So, yeah, make contracts and run businesses without unnecessary regulation or intervention. Imagine what an asshole you need to be to interpret the freedom to participate in the market as equal opportunity. They argue that if you remove the barriers to entry the market, for example, if you eliminate certain business regulations, if you lower taxes, etc., that can create a level playing field where everyone can potentially build wealth, irrespective of their starting point. They also often advocate for improving the quality of education, which they believe is a key determinant for one's ability to succeed. But who is going to pay for the education of the poor people? This is literally the next sentence. However, they often favor private or competitive schooling options rather than state-run education systems, as they believe competition increases quality. But how am I going to educate myself if I'm broke? I don't know. Libertarianism in its purest form relies on the idea that everyone is starting from the same position in life. This is delusional. There is an ongoing debate among economists about whether these libertarian principles actually lead to increased opportunity for all. And it cites some research that allegedly suggests that economic freedom can reduce poverty rates. Now, one of the things that ChatGPT sometimes does is it comes up with names of books and articles that don't actually exist. So I'm going to check whether this book exists. Economic Freedom and Economic Privilege by Peter J. Butke. And it doesn't exist. What about the second one? Does Economic Freedom Cause Prosperity? An IV Approach by Lawson, Murphy, and Powell. Unfortunately, it made up both of these books. I'll try to do something different. I'll run ChatGPT 4 with access to the web, and I'll ask it to give me references to libertarian research about how free markets reduce poverty rates. Yeah, I think it did a better job this time. The Atlas Network cites a research study, the relationship between economic freedom and poverty rates, cross-country evidence. And this research provides evidence that economic freedom is essential to reducing poverty worldwide. I mean, at least it's good to know that this is a real paper, right? There is 0 citations though. The study, which covers 20 years of data across 151 countries, found that an increase in a country's government integrity score and reductions in non-tariff barriers and tariff rates lead to lower poverty levels. The Fraser Institute argues that as the world shifted to free markets, poverty rates fell significantly. The Institute argues that despite a threefold increase in global population since 1950, the absolute number of people living in poverty dropped by more than 60%. The report also shows that in the economically freest countries, only a small percentage of the population live in extreme poverty. I want to click on that link, at least to know what countries are considered as the economically freest countries. Peru, Norway, Denmark, Taiwan, Canada, Ireland, New Zealand. Okay, we're definitely going to read this article, but I have a little bit of a problem. I don't think that I really understand what a free market is, because here we see Norway. I think it's common knowledge that Norway uses a social democratic model that is characterized by a strong welfare state, high taxation, and extensive social benefits, right? Also, Norway has a high degree of government intervention in certain sectors. For example, energy, natural resources. I think that there is government-owned companies that play a significant role in the country's oil industry. Given all that, it kind of seems like Norway is not the ideal state for a libertarian. To be quite honest, I would assume that the kind of a free market that a libertarian would have in mind would be much closer to something like what we had in Congo. I mean, you know, Rubber, ivory, cutting people's hands off. A free market is an economic system in which the prices for goods and services are determined by the open market and by consumers. In a free market, the laws and forces of supply and demand are free from any intervention from a government or other authority, and from all forms of economic privilege, monopolies, and artificial scarcities. Wait a second. A free market is free from monopolies as well. How do libertarians explain why a free market would not result in a monopoly? Libertarians argue that free markets are the best tool to prevent monopolies for several reasons. First reason, competition. In a free market, competition is encouraged and monopolies are naturally discouraged. If a business begins to gain too much power and starts raising prices, this creates an opportunity for other businesses to enter the market and to offer similar goods or services at a lower price. How exactly would they be able to offer similar goods at a lower price? Usually when you're a small business, your prices are not lower, they're higher. Like, every statement that I read here raises so many questions and I want to address them immediately. I guess I will just stop worrying about that. This episode goes off the rails and maybe it's fine. I asked ChatGPT to pretend that it is a very well-educated opponent of libertarianism and then asked it to debate the take that we just read about the competition, the free market that discourages monopolies, and so on. So it says that in reality, markets are not always perfectly competitive. There are many situations where barriers to entry are high due to factors like high startup costs, regulatory burdens. Well, a libertarian would argue that we need to remove them, right? Also, there is natural monopolies. Some industries, such as utilities, are structured in a way that naturally discourages competition. For instance, it would be impractical and inefficient for multiple companies to build competing sets of water pipes or power lines. In these cases, laissez-faire market mechanisms can lead to monopolies that are able to exploit consumers. Yeah, and exactly this. If you're a company with enough resources, you can lower your prices for some time because you have a lot of resources and you can survive with lower prices. And that would basically expel your competitors from the market because they cannot sustain themselves if the prices are so low. In a completely free market, those with more resources have a distinct advantage, and this can lead to a concentration of wealth and power that is detrimental to social stability and fairness. Yeah, this is a little bit confusing, to be quite honest. How exactly do you decide which of these arguments is more convincing? I guess you can say that you need some evidence. We do know that monopolies exist, and we do know that our markets can produce them. Is there any evidence of a free market that is free enough for a libertarian that has been functioning for a long time and did not produce a monopoly eventually? Wow, it takes ChatGPT a long time to start answering that. As for real-world examples, it is difficult to point to a market that is free enough for a libertarian that has not produced a monopoly, mainly because no modern economy operates under a completely free market system. Every economy around the world has some level of government intervention, whether in the form of regulations, taxes, or other policies. But there are sectors within economies that have been significantly deregulated and have seen positive results. For example, the deregulation of the airline industry in the United States in the 1970s led to increased competition, lower prices, and more options for consumers. Yet again, this is really weird to use such examples if you are a libertarian, because this is not an example of a truly free market not producing a monopoly and resulting in innovation in competition. This is an example of a regulated market that has been deregulated a little bit. It is very hard to argue with someone who says that after the second coming, everything is going to be great. After we free our markets of any government intervention, everything is going to be fine. Of course, one would argue that talking to ChatGPT to actually get to the gist of libertarianism is not the best approach. Yeah, that's what they say. Have you ever read any of the books? What are the books, though? Hayek, The Road to Serfdom. I actually have this one, and I've read it. And Popper, Open Society and Its Enemies. I also have this one. Give me a second. Yeah, there you go. This is the second volume, and I read the first one, and I skimmed through the second one. I actually loved the first one. Popper is, of course, an amazing author. But here is the problem. It did not even occur to me while I was reading this book that actually I was reading one of the essential libertarian texts. Yeah, whatever. Let's look at the classic one. Capitalism and Freedom by Friedman. It is a seminal work by the Nobel Prize-winning economist Milton Friedman. First published in 1962, the book advocates for laissez-faire economic policies and links economic freedom to political freedom. What does Friedman think about the role of government? Friedman believes that the government's role should be limited and largely restricted to rule enforcement and maintaining law and order, protecting property rights and mediating disputes. Well, this looks reasonable. It does not seem like he is arguing that we should completely get rid of the government. He also asserts that economic freedom is a prerequisite for political freedom, also nothing bad about that statement. Advocates for a monetary rule where the money supply would increase at a steady and predictable rate. Well, wait, this is interesting. This is close to what we have in Bitcoin, right? A steady and predictable rate of the increase of the money supply. Yeah, it's funny. For education, Friedman proposes the idea of school vouchers, which would give parents the freedom to choose the school their child attends, fostering competition and improving the quality of education. Wait a second. This is not stupid. Also, this is not delusional. So I think what might have been happening is I've been having a debate with a straw man. Maybe there is different sub-schools of libertarianism, and the ones that I know of that seem to be very delusional are actually the extreme ones, the ones that mainstream libertarians frown upon. Yeah, let's explore this possibility. Please tell me about the main different types of libertarianism, and for each type, specify how popular it is compared to others. So there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 types of libertarianism that chatgpt knows about. They are classical liberalism, minarchism, anarcho-capitalism, left libertarianism, libertarian conservatism, and objectivism. By the way, I don't get it. Classical liberalism, but we just saw that libertarianism and liberalism are two different things. What's going on here? Let's investigate this. So classical liberalism is the original form of libertarianism, inspired by thinkers like John Locke and Adam Smith. Classical liberals believe in the fundamental importance of individual liberty and private property, and they argue that the best way to protect these liberties is through a limited government and a free market economy. As the most traditional form of libertarianism, classical liberalism can be found in the philosophical underpinnings of many Western democracies. I'm suspicious of this. Wikipedia tells us that classical liberalism is also considered closely tied with right libertarianism in the United States. In Europe, on the other hand, liberalism, whether social or conservative, is classical liberalism in itself. So the term classical liberalism mainly refers to the center-right economic liberalism. I'm not sure that we needed all of that information, but at least we know that ChatGPT is not making this up, which is already a win. Minarchism. Minarchists advocate for a night watchman state in which the government's role is limited to protecting individuals from aggression, theft, breach of contract, and fraud. This includes maintaining a police force, a military, and courts. Okay, so at least we now know that that you shouldn't ask a minarchist the classical question that is usually addressed to libertarians: how are courts going to work under libertarianism? Minarchism is one of the more popular forms of libertarianism, particularly in the United States. Okay, moving on. The next one is anarcho-capitalism. Anarcho-capitalists take the principles of libertarianism to their logical extreme. The extremists. Okay. Arguing for the complete abolition of the state. So they are like super hardcore socialists or communists. They're saying that we never actually got there. We never actually got to free market. But when we get there, you'll see how all the problems solve themselves magically, right? In an anarcho-capitalist society, all services, including law enforcement, courts, and defense, would be provided by the free market. While anarcho-capitalism has a significant presence in libertarian discussions, particularly online, this is a very interesting note, particularly online. How would we interpret this? I've always thought that the people who actually produce content on the internet are not a good representation of the global population. Those people, so it seems, tend to be either trolls or people who are hunting for clicks and views, or just naturally have very radical opinions on things. This is not based on any research, of course, this is just how I feel. And this, of course, applies less to types of content that require actually showing your face. So, while it has a significant presence in libertarian discussions, it is less popular in terms of practical politics, as it is considered radical and unfeasible by many. So yeah, it seems like all this time I've been debating the ideas that probably anarcho-capitalists have. And they do seem to be radical and unfeasible. So maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe this whole anarcho-capitalist branch exists specifically for online discussions. Moving on, left libertarianism. Left libertarians share the libertarian emphasis on individual liberty, but they also stress the importance of social justice, often supporting measures such as a universal basic income, interesting, or communal ownership of natural resources. This form of libertarianism is less common than the others in the United States, but it has a notable following in other parts of the world, particularly Europe. That sounds just about right. Libertarian conservatism. I try to imagine what that could be. I try hard, but I fail. So this ideology blends libertarian principles with conservative social values. Libertarian conservatives advocate for minimal government intervention in both economic affairs and personal lives, but they may also support traditional social norms and institutions. This strain of libertarianism is fairly popular, especially within conservative political movements in the United States. I think I'm gonna ask ChatGPT to give me a few names. For each branch of libertarianism, I would probably want to know who are the most prominent representatives of that branch. Okay, the last type of libertarianism, objectivism. Okay, so this is the philosophy of Ayn Rand. Good lord. Objectivism isn't necessarily a majoritarian position within libertarianism, but its influence is substantial. I am very happy with what I just read because this is very refreshing. Most of the weird and obnoxious shit that we hear about libertarianism is actually more about anarcho-capitalism. So you can safely make fun of anarcho-capitalism while saying that there are types of libertarianism that are relatively sane. Good to know. Good to know. I'm happy with this. I think we're still going to have fun with anarcho-capitalism in this episode. I mean, wouldn't you agree that we still need to get the answers to the most important questions, such as who is going to build the roads? And I think that it's not as challenging a question if directed at a minarchist than it is if directed at anarcho-capitalist. But before that, I want to know about the most prominent representatives of each type of libertarianism that we just learned about. It says that Milton Friedman can be viewed as the most prominent representative of classical liberalism. His advocacy for free markets and limited government intervention has had a lasting impact on the field of economics and libertarian thought. For minarchism, it's Ron Paul, a former US congressman and presidential candidate who is often associated with minarchism. Before we proceed, I actually want to understand what the etymology of the word minarchism is. I would assume that this is a combination of min, as in minimum, and archos, which is something like government or rule. Yep, there we go. 1971, coined by Samuel Edward Konkin. It is a blend of minimum and archy, which means government. Who the hell is Samuel Edward Konkin, though? Edward Konkin III. Apologies. Look at this man. Wow. Also known as SEK3, all caps, was a Canadian-American left libertarian philosopher and Austrian school economist. As the author of the publication New Libertarian Manifesto, he was a proponent of a political philosophy he named agorism. Personal life: he was born there and there, married such and such. Although he was an atheist, Konkin was a lifelong fan of C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. I am definitely not going to make any comments about that. Konkin was also notable for his Konkin was also notable for his style of dress. To show his anarchist beliefs, he dressed completely in black, a color associated with that movement since the late 19th century. In 2004, Konkin died of natural causes in his apartment in West Los Angeles, California. Konkin rejected voting, believing it to be inconsistent with libertarian ethics. It's interesting, I don't hate voting as such, but I would probably introduce some element of randomness to the classical election process. He likewise opposed involvement with the Libertarian Party, which he regarded as a statist co-option of libertarianism. I'm very much interested in the Libertarian Party of America, actually. Yes, this is the Libertarian Party in the United States. I think if we have time, we're going to have a brief look at the debates of Sam Cedar and the leader of the Libertarian Party of the United States of America. Not sure about that, though. Askey E3 was an opponent of influential minarchist philosopher Robert Nozick and referred to Nozick's devotees as Nozis. I mean, Konkin presents his strategy for achieving a libertarian society in his manifesto, which is called New Libertarian Manifesto. I was going to ask ChatGPT to summarize this manifesto for me, but we'll see how well Wikipedia can do that for us. Since he rejected voting and other means by which people typically attempt social change, he encouraged people to withdraw their consent from the state by devoting their economic activities to black market and gray market sources, which would not be taxed or regulated. So it seems like SKA3 is closer to anarcho-capitalism, since he identifies as an anarchist and wears black. Although Wikipedia tells that he is affiliated with left libertarianism. I'm confused. So we were talking about black market as a form of opposition to existing government structures. Konkin called transactions on these markets, as well as other activities that bypass the state, counter-economics. Peaceful transactions take place in a free market, or agora. Hence his term agorism for the society he sought to achieve. What about the controversies? So apparently there was this Institute for Historical Review, which published a book by James J. Martin on Raphael Lemkin, and Konkin was on the board of directors of the Institute for Historical Review. And in this book, James J. Martin apparently denied Holocaust. And while Konkin personally rejected Holocaust denial, he defended the IHR because IHR is the Institute for Historical Review, because he believed that its freedom of speech was being suppressed. Wikipedia proceeds to tell us that Konkin's appraisal of Martin's book, specifically the second chapter, in which Martin labeled the claims of the mass murder of Jews as a well-coordinated and orchestrated propaganda assault. Well, that's nice. So he labeled it as a summary of Martin's libertarian revisionist views of the Second World War, and the highlight of the book and a valuable booklet on its own for the libertarian and the hardcore revisionist. And that is questionable. And yeah, I don't know what to say. Doesn't look good, but not going to dig any deeper. He was wearing black and denied Holocaust. I think he would be very, very popular on 4chan. Let's check two additional things here. First, the agorism. This is a social philosophy that advocates creating a society in which all relations between people are voluntary exchanges by means of counter-economics, engaging with aspects of non-violent revolution. Yeah, we read about this. The symbol for agorism is an A to the third power, standing for agora, anarchy, action. The Wikipedia page for the New Libertarian Manifesto is rather short, so I'm going to ask ChatGPT to do something about that for me. By the way, we have to remember that we got here because we initially wanted to know about minarchism. We googled the etymology of this word, and thus we stumbled upon Samuel Edward Konkin III. It's important to keep track of what's happening here. It's easy to get lost. Okay, New Libertarian Manifesto was published in 1980. It is considered a key work in the philosophy of agorism, which is a libertarian social philosophy that advocates for the creation of a society in which all relations between people are voluntary exchanges. The book is divided into 5 parts, and I'll summarize each section. In the introduction, Konkin introduces the idea of a new libertarianism, and it's supposed to be distinct from the old libertarianism, which he criticizes for abandoning its radical roots in favor of political pragmatism. Actually, what are those radical roots that Konkin is talking about here? Jesus Christ. There is a Wikipedia page that is called The Timeline of Libertarian Thinkers. And I swear to you, it starts with Laozi. I think I'm going to discard everything here that is prior to the 19th century. Mostly because this is more about the individual freedom and yada yada. But the interesting things start to appear in the early 1800s. Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, a French social thinker and the first person to call themselves an anarchist, born in 1809. Then there is Henry David Thoreau, and he advocated for minimal or no government and for civil disobedience against the authoritarian state. Okay, I guess he is right. Libertarianism does have some radical roots. The next section is statism or condition. He contends that the state exists to maintain the status quo, and that it does so through coercion and violence. He also criticizes the electoral process as a tool of the state and rejects the idea that meaningful change can come through political means. It seems like in modern days, people who have such views usually propose something like boycotting the elections, or I don't know. Okay, our goal. Agorism. Agorism is our goal, says Konkin, and presents the concept of agorism. He defines agorism as a society where all human interactions are voluntary and free from coercion. And the cornerstone of this society is the free market, or agora, which means a market in Greek. And in this agora, the goods and services are exchanged without government interference. It's actually funny. So America has had a very regulated market for a long time. And I think that Americans seem to forget what happens when the market is not regulated at all. In my country, for example, there was a brief period in the 90s, and this resulted in the golden age of organized crime and bandits of all sorts. Counter-economics is the practice of engaging in non-violent activities that the state defines as illegal, such as black market and gray market transactions. Konkin proposes that by using counter-economics, individuals can challenge and undermine the state. He suggests that as more people participate in these activities, the power of the state will gradually diminish. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue with that. I just don't think that the end goal is what we actually want. And so, as the new libertarian strategy, Konkin suggests that libertarians should abandon political activism in favor of educational outreach and active participation in counter-economic activities. Okay, I've had enough of this. We now have a fairly sound understanding of what agorism is. Let's move on to minarchism. Yeah, so we were talking about the personalities. For minarchism, we have Ron Paul, a former US congressman and presidential candidate. Which lets me assume that probably minarchism is not all about anarchy. Let's do a reality check. So Ron Paul, an American author, activist, physician, and retired politician who served as the US representative for Texas. Okay. In 1976, Paul formed the Foundation for Rational Economics and Education, and in 1985 was named the first chairman of the conservative PAC, Citizens for a Sound Economy. Both of those free market groups focused on limited government. In January 2013, Paul retired from Congress but remained active on college campuses, giving speeches promoting libertarian and libertarian conservative ideas. We got ourselves a problem here. There is zero mentions of minarchism in this article. Actually, I just realized that Ron Paul sounds very much like RuPaul. Just a fun fact. The Venn diagram of Ron Paul and other mysteries of libertarianism explained. So apparently this article does view Ron Paul as a minarchist. Okay, whatever. To be quite honest, there is not that much that I want to know about minarchism because it seems to be very straightforward. There should be less government, but we still want to fund the police and the army. For anarcho-capitalism, ChatGPT suggests that we have a look at David Friedman. There is a bit less of extravaganza in the way he looks, and he is not dead yet. He was born in 1945 and he is 79. His most popular book is The Machinery of Freedom. In this book, he sketched a form of anarcho-capitalism where all goods and services, including law itself, can be produced by the free market. Friedman advocates for an incrementalist approach to achieve anarcho-capitalism by gradual privatization of areas that government is involved in, ultimately privatizing the law itself. Okay, so this person definitely has something to say about how the courts are going to work in a libertarian society. He also advocates a consequentialist version of anarcho-capitalism, arguing for it on a cost-benefit analysis of state versus no state. It is contrasted with the natural rights approach, as propounded most notably by Murray Rothbard. He's actually the second person mentioned by ChatGPT in the anarcho-capitalist section, which is, I think, good. So we're digging deeper into anarcho-capitalism because I want to do so. Okay, so there is two things that we're going to do here. The first one is I want to ask ChatGPT to summarize the machinery of freedom with an emphasis on how the law can be privatized. And the second thing is I want to figure out how Murray Rothbard's ideas are opposed to the ideas of David Friedman. Okay, so we'll start with the machinery of freedom. One of the central themes of the book is the privatization of law, which involves envisioning a society where legal systems and dispute resolution mechanisms are provided by private entities rather than a centralized government. Friedman argues that a competitive market for legal systems would be more efficient and just than a monopoly government legal system. He suggests that individuals would choose the legal systems that best align with their personal values and preferences. These private legal systems would offer a variety of laws and codes, catering to different communities and allowing for a diverse range of societal norms. I am sorry, David Friedman, this still sounds absolutely insane. I can't do anything with myself. I don't get how this is going to work. Maybe I should read this book. Dispute resolution would be carried out through arbitration and private courts, where the parties involved would select their own arbitrators or judges. The legal service providers would compete for customers, ensuring that they provide efficient and fair resolutions to conflicts. There is one question that immediately comes into mind. What if there is two people that have different personal values and preferences, and those two people do not agree on a specific judge or on a specific company that provides court services? What happens then? I guess I'm asking too many questions. The role of law enforcement would also be privatized. These agencies will be responsible for protecting the rights and property of their clients, and conflicts between different agencies would be resolved through negotiation or arbitration. Dude, what the fuck? Once again, it feels like this person never lived in a state with a weak government, or just refuses to acknowledge the existence of these states and the data and experience that those states provide us with. Oh yeah, right. Friedman acknowledges that transitioning to a privatized legal system would not be without challenges. Okay, thank you for that. He addresses potential concerns such as the possibility of conflicting laws and the enforcement of contracts between different legal systems. However, he argues that market forces and competition would incentivize legal systems to adapt and evolve, ultimately leading to a more efficient and responsive system of justice. Now, what do you do with these people? To address the issue of conflicting laws, Friedman proposes several mechanisms that could arise in a privatized legal system. One of the possibilities is the development of specialized courts or arbitral forums that would focus on resolving conflicts between different legal systems. These forums would be responsible for determining which law applies in a given dispute and providing a resolution accordingly. Yeah, but who is going to resolve the conflicts between those specialized courts? Contractual provisions. Friedman suggests that contracts in a privatized legal system would include provisions addressing potential conflicts between different legal systems. Parties entering into agreements would specify which legal system's rules and courts will govern their contract and resolve any disputes that may arise. Once again, what if people do not want to agree on these issues? Over time, customary law would develop as a result of individuals and communities interacting and reaching agreements based on shared practices and expectations. Okay, I'm going to give it one last chance. If a person doesn't want to go to court, who can make them do so? In a privatized legal system as envisioned by David Friedman, the decision to go to court would generally be voluntary. Yes, of course. Private legal service providers would compete to offer attractive and efficient dispute resolution services to attract clients. However, there are scenarios where a person may be compelled to participate in a legal process. These scenarios typically involve contractual obligations or legal requirements imposed by the agreements individuals voluntarily enter into. For example, contractual obligations. If individuals have entered into a contract that includes a dispute resolution clause specifying arbitration or court proceedings, they would be bound by the terms of the contract. Failing to comply with the contractual obligation to participate in the chosen dispute resolution process could lead to the consequences such as breaching the contract and potential legal liabilities. Yeah, I think that I vaguely remember something like that. Like, when you enter a community, like a group of people occupying a certain area, you would have to sign a document, and thus you will have some contractual obligations. But what if you're a child? What if you're born into that community? Also, what if you just breach the law and move to another community that you do not have any contractual obligations to? That community, of course, can have some contract with your previous community that will regulate such causes. But it seems like there's gonna be just too many contracts, basically. If there's gonna be multiple local entities, as libertarians probably like it to be, then there's gonna be a lot of contracts between them, like the number of independent entities to the second power, which gets out of hand very, very fast. Okay, legal requirements. In certain cases, there may be legal obligations that require participation in a legal process. These could include situations where a person is summoned to the court as a witness or as a party to a legal dispute. Failure to comply with legal requirements to participate in court proceedings, when required by law, can result in penalties or legal consequences. Okay, I'm done with this. I will probably try to have a closer look at this book because it seems to be full of ideas that I do not understand, but not in the scope of this episode. So the difference between a cost-benefit analysis of state and the natural rights approach. Man, I feel so stupid. Like a couple of minutes ago when I was preparing for this recording session, I was like, man, there's a lot of Friedmans in libertarianism. Like there is Milton Friedman, there is David D. Friedman, and then I realized that David Friedman is the son of economists Rose and Milton Friedman. So it's literally the same Friedman in a way. I guess I should have noticed this last time. But anyways, natural rights libertarianism, also known as the deontological liberalism. I'm going to let ChatGPT explain to us what that is. Please explain to me what natural rights libertarianism is and how it's different from the consequentialist version of anarcho-capitalism. So this approach asserts the existence of inherent individual rights and emphasizes the importance of respecting and protecting those rights. It is a moral framework that places a strong emphasis on individual liberty and property rights. Now, I haven't read this further yet, but I will that the consequentialist version of anarcho-capitalism does not assume any inherent rights, and teaches that we will eventually arrive at a state in which those rights are expected because the system is going to naturally converge at this state. And natural rights libertarianism probably wants to first figure out what those inherent individual rights are and then grant them to each person at the very start. Yeah, this is my assumption. Let's read the text though. So these are the key principles. Individual rights. Natural rights libertarianism asserts that individuals possess certain fundamental rights that are inherent to their nature as human beings. These rights are often considered to include the rights to life, liberty, and property. These are seen as pre-existing and not granted by any government or authority. Moving on, the non-aggression principle. A core principle of natural rights libertarianism is the non-aggression principle, abbreviated as NAP. It states that it is inherently wrong to initiate force or aggression against another individual or their property, except in cases of self-defense. The NAP serves as a moral foundation, guiding the belief that interactions between individuals should be voluntary and consensual. And of course, the limited government principle. Natural rights libertarians advocate for a minimal or limited role of the government in society. But they do think that the government should exist, mostly to protect individual rights, including enforcing contracts, preventing fraud, and defending against external aggression. And on the other hand, we have consequentialist anarcho-capitalism, which is a variant of anarcho-capitalism that emphasizes the practical benefits and outcomes of a free market society, rather than the moral or philosophical principles underlying individual rights. Consequentialist anarcho-capitalists focus on the positive consequences that arise from the absence of a centralized government and the operation of free markets. And one of the key features of consequentialist anarcho-capitalism includes spontaneous order, which suggests that complex social systems, including legal and dispute resolution mechanisms, can emerge naturally from voluntary interactions and market processes. They argue that these spontaneous systems can be more effective and adaptive than centrally planned or government-imposed structures. Yeah, so it seems like I was right. No way to prove it to you, of course, but just believe me, this is exactly what I anticipated. The question, though, is, why did ChatGPT tell us that Murray Rothbard is an anarcho-capitalist? Oh shit, he was an anarcho-capitalist. But this, natural rights libertarianism, does not look like anarcho-capitalism. There is definitely something that I'm missing here. Okay, I think I found the explanation. So, some deontological libertarians, such as Ayn Rand, advocate a minimal government to protect individuals from any violation of their rights and to prosecute those who initiate force against others. Others, such as Murray Rothbard, advocate the abolition of state as they see the state as being an institutionalized initiation of force due to taxation. Oh, that's what it is about. I mean, I know that I'm not a bright person, but it's really hard not to get lost in the multiple branches of libertarianism. You would assume that if there is a branch that is called natural rights libertarianism, its proponents probably agree on questions such as, should we have a government? But no, although probably there's different types of taxonomies of libertarianism, and they might be kinda orthogonal to each other. So maybe this is not that much of a problem. Good, great, splendid. I think it's time for us to move on. The last topic that we're going to discuss today is left libertarianism. ChatGPT tells us that Noam Chomsky is a left libertarian. This is interesting for me, for many reasons. First of all, I have a little bit of a personal connection with Noam Chomsky. I studied generative syntax at the university. And secondly, I don't think that Noam Chomsky actually thinks that he is a libertarian. I think that he's actually opposed to that label. So let's try to figure out what's going on here. Noam Chomsky, while not a traditional libertarian, is known for his left libertarian views. He advocates for individual freedom, social justice, and a critique of authoritarian power structures. Not informative at all. Let's try to fix this. So basically, left libertarianism is also about limited government, but it has a concern for social justice and wants to address systemic inequalities. It is often associated with a critique of both state power and corporate power, advocating for the protection of individual liberties while also addressing economic and social disparities. In terms of economic policy, left libertarians often challenge the concentration of wealth and power that can rise in unfettered free markets. Interesting, they can support universal basic income. Their goal is to create a more egalitarian society that maximizes individual freedom and minimizes systemic oppression. Yeah, so let's read about Noam Chomsky and how he doesn't like to be called a libertarian. And this is quite interesting because I think that this is the first time when I actually try to argue with ChatGPT about something. So yeah, ChatGPT admits that Chomsky has expressed reservations about using the term libertarian to describe himself. Chomsky has argued that in the United States, the term has been largely co-opted by right-wing ideologies that prioritize laissez-faire capitalism and limited government intervention. Instead, he prefers to describe himself as an anarchist or a libertarian socialist, highlighting his commitment to social justice and worker empowerment. This makes a lot of sense, and I can totally see how Noam Chomsky actually says something like that. Oh yes, ideologically, Chomsky aligns with anarcho-syndicalism and libertarian socialism. What the fuck is anarcho-syndicalism? This is not the first time I hear this term, by the way. I even think that there were multiple occasions when I was very drunk in a bar and told someone that Chomsky was an anarcho-syndicalist. Fortunately, no one ever asked me what that meant. What is anarcho-syndicalism and how is it related to libertarianism? So this theory emphasizes the direct action of workers and the abolition of both the state and capitalist system through the establishment of self-management. Anarcho-syndicalists envision a society organized along decentralized voluntary associations where workers collectively control the means of production. I am getting a little bit irritated here because this sounds very close to some versions of communism. In anarcho-syndicalism, labor unions play a central role in the transformation of society. These unions aim to unite workers across industries and advocate for the interests of the working class. Through direct action such as strikes, boycotts, and protests, anarcho-syndicalists seek to challenge and dismantle hierarchical power structures, including both the state and private ownership of capital. So basically what anarcho-syndicalists share with libertarianism is a skepticism of state power and a desire to create a society based on voluntary interactions. But libertarianism is all about private property and libertarianism loves capital, while anarcho-syndicalists do not like the idea of private ownership of capital. I wouldn't probably assume that anarcho-syndicalists get along well with libertarians. Maybe a little bit better with left libertarians, such as Noam Chomsky. Just look at this man. I heard that he is still sharp. Good. I think it's time to actually end this episode. I don't think that I kept the promise that I made at the beginning of the episode. I think that I promised to keep things unbiased, and I obviously failed to do so. Overall, I think that this has been a very positive experience because it's clear now that libertarianism has many faces and many branches, and they often have very different views on how the world should work. Most of the weird takes are generated by anarcho-capitalists, and this is what makes it the most interesting branch to research. There is also some further reading. I think the book is called The Machinery of Freedom. If you, like me, ever wondered how law can be privatized, then probably this is the book for you to read. I will definitely try to do so, and maybe I will shoot another episode to do a review of that book. That's it, folks. Press like, subscribe, and leave comments. See you in the next episode.